One of the biggest challenges finding your way of studying that's most efficient to you, so you're not like spinning your wheels on something like the lecture. If you didn't understand something they said in the lecture, like just skip it, get to the multiple choice, like the meat and potatoes of what the actual exam's going to be. So
Let's welcome our next guest who just recently passed the CPA exam.
I am from Eastern Pennsylvania. I grew up there, and I am now living in Portland. I moved to Portland to finish school at Portland State University, and I ended up getting a job here, so I plan to stay, and I love Portland.
How did you study for the CPA exam in general?
When I first started studying, I would spend way too much time in the details, but overall I've adapted my study style to really know what was efficient for me. And so overall I took Becker. It was provided by the firm that I work for, so I used that and the final review, which was really great. And for myself to feel ready, I actually got the Becker to 90% completion by the time I walked into the exam. So they have a completion rate on the homepage and the dashboard. So my overall study was, okay, if I see that hit 90%, I'm close to being ready, or like I have a chance to pass. So that was kind of my target.
How do you study for multiple choice questions?
So the multiple choice questions I went through, so I kind of layered my studying where I did all the lectures of a chapter, then all of the skills practice, and then went back and did the multiple choice. So when I was starting on the multiple choice, I was actually in a state of review because I hadn't got to that topic for a while. So I would take one pass through them, get maybe 30% right, and then go on to the next one. So I did that kind of layering method throughout the whole exam. So I was constantly going back and doing the multiple choice that I hadn't got up to 100% complete. And then on the multiple choice that 2 times I got it wrong, I made a flashcard and I wrote the question or like some version of the question, and on the back, especially if it was a calculation, I would write out the whole calculation on the back. And it was very time consuming, but I figured out that it helped me a lot just to have that flashcard. So instead of going back to a multiple choice question, I would just flash the flashcard and like imprint it photographically in my brain.
How do you study for simulation questions?
The simulations I would save till the absolute end. So I did that layering method where I was doing all lectures, all skills practice, and then combing through the MCQs. And then when I was all done, I went back to do the sims. So I was in kind of a constant state of review. And I only took one pass through the sims. If I struggled on a sim, I would make a flashcard. By the end, I had a stack of flashcards this big, which is very time consuming and it's definitely not for everyone. But for me, in those final 2 weeks, just having everything that I didn't know in my hands and I could just flash through it, it really helped me out. So yeah, I would take one pass through all the sims and watch the Skill Master videos. Those helped a lot to explain, really conceptualize what was going on.
How do you take study notes?
So I didn't take any notes because everything that I needed was on the flashcards. I was all flashcards for anything that I needed help with. And I feel like it was a lot of writing and you're buying a lot of flashcards. But because I could dwindle them out when I had them memorized, I felt like it was a lot easier to deal with a stack that I was just seeing go down instead of a notebook where you're just kind of paging through, trying to figure out what you remembered. So for me, flashcards were all my notes. I just gave them to a friend that's studying, and she's like, all of these stuff this big. For me, it was about applying the pen to the paper. That's how it was really getting into my brain, and then seeing T accounts, like pensions. I'd have the full pension problem written out, and I could just like flap to that in a square that big, and it was easy for me to just imprint into my brain. So I had them that's a to-do list, but I had them about this size. I don't have any to a phone. It's about that size. They would definitely be dwindled down. I would take all the extraneous information that I already knew. I just needed to know the process. Like if you were solving a variance analysis, I'd put like a quick note about the numbers that they give you in the problem, and on the back, these are the steps on how to solve that variance analysis. And I'd write the numbers, although when I was looking at the card, I'm not actually memorizing the numbers because I'm not getting my calculator out. And it's like, these are the 4 steps. Here's how I get the answer. So There's a good one. Yeah. This is what I really struggled on BEC. Cost accounting. This is the worst. So yeah, I found a good one. So joint cost allocation, sales value known at split off. There's a couple ways to solve it. So on the back I just put, I don't know if that's backwards, but I put just the fact pattern and then the 2 steps. So where are we at? Over here. The first step and then the second step. And I put all the numbers just so it had a format of numbers, but when I was going through, I was just memorizing the processes. Well, I like that too, because I'd make a flashcard and then 2 weeks later, I'm like, well, I've memorized that already. I don't need it. So my stack gets like smaller and smaller and smaller. And then the day before the exam, I just have like, you know, these, and then I just memorize them and good to go. Well, not always good to go, but yeah, sometimes you're like, well, no one else can help me with this material unless they're studying this exam.
Which material did you study first for the CPA exam?
So I started out, first chapter, did all the lectures all the way through, then went back, did all the skills practice. And this is Becker specific, it might be different for other ones. And then I started the multiple choice questions. And I took one pass through, and the ones that were really tricky, I made a flashcard. And then, yeah, so once I did one pass through of the whole chapter's multiple choice, I start the next chapter's lectures. And then every day I go back to different modules, MCQs, and kind of take another pass through those. So it sounds a little confusing, but for me, I didn't do practice tests because I felt like I was in a constant state of review that way. So I was always going back and doing old multiple choice and old skills practice that I struggled with. So in that process of doing the MCQs is where I started making flashcards.